Hello everyone. Today we are going to be talking about Hinduism, how it originated, some of the central beliefs, and the impact it has on South Asia. Today, India. As we go along, I want to give my normal disclaimer. Please forgive me for any mispronunciations, and please feel free to correct me if I make any historical or religious inaccuracies. Hinduism is very interesting in that there are many different sects of the religion that all have slightly different and varying beliefs. So I'm going to try today to kind of hit on the main overall topics, but please, as always, feel free to correct me if I make a mistake. So the history of Hinduism begins with the migration of a group of people known as the Indo-Europeans thousands and thousands of years ago. We're talking 2000 BCE and earlier. And so the Indo-Europeans were pastoralists, which meant that they migrated from place to place looking after their animals. They were primarily herders, herding horses, cows, sheep, pig, goats, all of the above. And because they moved around so much, because they were so used to animals and so familiar with horses, they were very good fighters. And when the Indo-Europeans started migrating, right, these pastoralists ended up conquering territory stretching from England all the way down to India. Now, this wasn't a unified empire or anything, but just different tribes of Indo-Europeans conquered different places. How do we know that the Indo-Europeans conquered this whole territory, being that it was so long ago? Because of language. And so this is very interesting. We know that the Indo-Europeans, right, stretched as far as England to India. India is kind of behind my face here. Because there have been a lot of similarities found in the languages of English, India, Eastern Europe, Iceland and Scandinavia. And so what that began was when the English actually colonized India, they realized they had a lot of words that were actually very similar. And so they started to wonder, why is that there? What is with this similarity? We've been thousands of miles apart our whole history. We've never interacted before this. Why are our languages similar? And so over the decades, linguists, people that study language, found out that pretty much all these languages in color here share a common root. And that root is Indo-European. So this visual gives you one example of how, the languages have developed, right? From Indo-European root, it branches off into Indo-Iranian or European, right? Which then break off into other languages. And the whole image kind of gets cut off, but the leaves are the modern languages we have today. So Italian, French, English, Yiddish, Polish, Marathi, Hindi, Bengali, Persian, right? All of those languages share a common root with the Indo-Europeans. And we also know that they traveled far and wide because we found their remains. Here's an example of a mummy found in the Gobi Desert in China. And, when this mummy was found, he was preserved thanks to the sand. They dated him and they realized that this is a very old mummy. This is thousands and thousands of years old. So old that they started to ask themselves, well, this kind of looks like a white guy. What's he doing in China? And so they believe he to be one of the Indo-Europeans that migrated around conquering. And so the Indo-Europeans are going to migrate down to India, and there they are going to meet a group of people that had already lived there for thousands of years, the Dravidians. And there's going to be a lot of conflict between the two. But one thing that the Aryans bring with them is their culture. Right? They bring an oral tradition, stories passed down of the gods and these, myths. And so those stories will eventually get compiled into the Rig Veda. Now, these ideas of the Aryans blend with the ideas of the Dravidians. And that blending, which we call a syncretism, ends up creating Hinduism. So, some differences in race and culture between the Aryans and the Dravidians. The Aryans were nomadic, they were light-skinned. The Dravidians were agricultural and they were dark-skinned. As I mentioned before, the two often clashed, but in periods of peace, the Dravidians taught the Aryans about agriculture. The Dravidians taught the Aryans how to settle down and how to eventually grow cities. As I mentioned before, the two were so closely intertwined, right? They interacted so much that their beliefs, their religions eventually blended, creating a syncretism that we know as Hinduism. And this culture was dominated by the Aryans. Why? Because they were the better fighters. Remember, they were originally pastoralists, meaning they were really, really good at fighting. And so once we start to see the blending of cultures between the Aryans and the Dravidians, this gives us the Vedic age, which is called it after the Rig Veda, the holy text. And so this was when we see the beginnings of Hinduism, the beginning of the history of Hinduism. And a major way that Hinduism impacts society is through the caste system. And Hinduism offers a legitimization of this caste system. And so what is the caste system? Let's find out. So the caste system is a social hierarchy, right, that is based on the religion of Hinduism. And in this social hierarchy, everyone has a spot. So we're going to be filling in this graphic organizer. If you guys would pause the video right now and kind of sketch out this graphic organizer in your notes, that is probably the best way to go about doing this. So pause the video now. When you're ready, come back to it. All right, so by this point, you've probably sketched out this graphic organizer, this image, and I'm going to explain to you guys how this represents the caste system. So in the caste system, right, we here represent it with a ladder. And the goal of the caste system is you want to climb up the ladder to achieve the final goal, right? A goal by the name of moksha. Moksha is kind of like the end result of the caste system, the end result of Hinduism. And there's a lot of different interpretations of it, but for our class today, we'll describe it as a dreamless sleep. Why is that the end result? The desired result? We'll talk about that in a second. So the caste system orders all living creatures into a social hierarchy. And so that social hierarchy, life here on Earth, the caste system is represented by this ladder. At the bottom, we have non-human living things. Ants, cats, sea slugs. And then above those, we start to have the human classes. And the first human class are the pariah. The pariah are also known as the untouchables. These are people that do what are considered to be dirty jobs, and so they themselves are considered to be dirty. Above the pariahs, you have the Sudras, who are laborers, farmers, carpenters, people that work with their hands. Above the Sudras, you have the Vaishya, which are the merchants, the business people, the people that work with money. Above them, you have the Kshatriyas, who are the warriors and the government class. So this includes the rulers, the political rulers as well. And above the Kshatriyas are the Brahmins. These are the priests of society. And so one thing I want to mention is that once life is organized like this, you are strictly stuck within your caste, okay? So if you are a pariah, that means your parents are pariahs. That means your children will become pariahs. There is no social mobility within one's life in the caste system. So if you are, for example, a kshatriya, right? Your parents are kshatriyas, your children are kshatriyas, your friends are all kshatriyas. There is not going to be social mingling between groups. And furthermore, each of these castes is broken down into subcastes, also known as jatis, J-A-T-I. And so, for example, again, we'll stick with the kshatriyas, right? This includes your average foot soldier, but it also includes the king. They're not going to be in the same social groups. And so they're going to be in different jatis. So the foot soldier, the common soldier, might be at the bottom of the kshatriya class, whereas the king will be at the top. And again, if you're a foot soldier, your parents were foot soldiers. Your children will be foot soldiers. Well, your son will be a foot soldier. If you have a daughter, she'll go and marry a foot soldier. So again, there's not really much social mobility here. People stay within their castes socially and throughout their whole life. Now, you might be thinking, well, that kind of sucks if you're a pariah, right? Everyone avoids you, you have the worst jobs, you're considered to be ritually unclean. Why would anyone bother to continue to be a pariah? Why wouldn't they rebel? Why wouldn't they revolt? Well, I'm sure they did, historically speaking. I'm sure it happened. However, Hinduism has a solution to this. The way Hinduism works, it's designed to get people to be good and to get people to fulfill their roles in society. And the way they do that in Hinduism is by promising all people that if they live a good life, they will be reincarnated into a higher caste. So reincarnation, one of our terms, is to die and be reborn in another body. Right? So depending on the life you lead in Hinduism, you could be reincarnated in a higher caste or reincarnated in a lower caste. How do they decide? Well, it's based on how good of a life you lead. So if you have a lot of good karma in your life, right, if you do a lot of good deeds, and your good karma outweighs your bad karma, so for example, if you help little old ladies cross the street, if you give to charity, if you volunteer your time, you'll have a lot of good karma, and when you die, you'll reincarnate up the ladder. However, if your bad karma outweighs the good, if you knock little old ladies down when they're trying to cross the street, if you steal from people, then you'll have bad karma and you'll be reincarnated down below the ladder. So this keeps people in a caste because let's say you're a pariah. You hate being mistreated, you hate being oppressed, you hate doing your job, but you know that I need to keep doing it. I need to keep doing a good job at it. I need to not lash out at the people above me. Because if I do all that, when I die, I will be reborn as a Sudras, or I'll be reborn as something higher. How do they determine what's good and what's bad karma? Well, it's based on the Dharma. Dharma is just like the kind of moral example, right? Dharma tells you what is good, what is bad. It's sort of like a moral code. So, with the caste system, what we see here is a way to organize society. Right? It's a way to keep people structured and to make sure all jobs, including the dirty ones, get done. Because if you don't do your job and you're a pariah, you might be reincarnated as a sea slug. Now, what happens in South Asian society is that when the Aryans come in, remember, they're better fighters. So they're going to end up on the top of society. So very frequently, the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, and the Vaisyas are all going to be Aryan people. The Sudras and the Pariahs more frequently will be the Dravidian people. All right? And so let's say you're born, you're a Sudras, and you say, you know what, this really sucks. I don't want to be a Sudras. Why do you accept it? Why do you accept that you have to have a worse job than other people? Well, because according to Hinduism, you are a Sudras because in your previous life, you were a crappy Vaisya, right? You were a bad person, and so you got knocked down a peg. So your life sucks now because you did bad in a past life. And so that's why people accepted their position in the caste, because they viewed it as punishment for something they did in a previous life. And so what we see in the caste system in Hinduism is a cycle, right? We see birth, we see death, we see rebirth, right? Reincarnation. And you kind of go into this cycle forever and ever and ever until your soul finally makes it up and achieves moksha. And that's why moksha is viewed as a peaceful sleep, a dreamless sleep, because your soul has been through the cycle of reincarnation so many times by that point, it's tired. And this idea of breaking free of that cycle is quite appealing. I just explained moksha. Karma, again, what you do to others gets done back to you, right? So if you live a good life, you will be rewarded with a better life after reincarnation. If you live a crappy life, you'll be punished by a worse life after reincarnation. Dharma is the moral code. And there's lots of epics, right? Much like the Greeks have their mythology, much like in the Bible, you have all these stories, all of these parables, right? So too will you have that in Hinduism, such as the Ramayana. I don't think I pronounced that correct. I apologize. But in this story, it highlights how people should live, right? How people should live their lives, how people should be good, so that they know an example to follow. There are some main deities in Hinduism. Vishnu, who is said to have been reincarnated several times, just each time to save Earth. So there's certain parts of Hinduism that believe, one of Vishnu's reincarnations was the Buddha. Another one of Vishnu's reincarnation was Jesus Christ. And so there's certain parts of Hinduism that believe, hey, Christianity, Buddhism are just different subcategories of Hinduism, which I think is just interesting. Again, Vishnu, preserver, save Earth. One of the other main gods is Shiva, the destroyer. I just skipped over the slide. I apologize. You might ask yourself, why would anyone worship someone known as the destroyer? Well, that gets back to this cycle of reincarnation, right? In order for you to be reborn, your old life has to end. So the last thing I want to mention is I want to talk briefly about Hindu architecture. And so if you look at this Hindu temple, think about what features you notice. Here's another. Right? What features exist? This one I think might actually be in Georgia. I could be wrong about that. Right? All of those temples share two qualities. One, they're stacked in layers, right? They go up towards the center. And the reason for that is the temples are a representation of the caste system. And so in olden times, a lot of temples, the interiors were restricted based on your caste. Untouchables had to stay outside, but Brahmins could go to the very center, the most sacred chambers. So the architecture of Hinduism represents the caste system in those layers. Another distinguishing feature of Hinduism architecture was very distinct sculptures and moldings within the temples themselves, right? So much like in Christian churches or other churches, they're going to have statues depicting religious stories, such as the Ramayana. And again, I apologize if I mispronounced that. So Hindu architecture, you have the layers as well as the intricate statues and sculptures.